I'll now hand you over to Ms. Katrina Crowe, who's the curator of the first Thought Talk. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. You're all very welcome here for our final First Thought event today. There'll be 2 more tomorrow. I think there are tickets for the morning sessions tomorrow, so if you feel like coming in out of the sun tomorrow morning, I'm assuming it's going to continue, feel free to book tickets for our talks. We're very, very pleased with the response to First Thought Talks this year. Packed houses in our new upgraded venue, which we're very pleased with. This evening we have a very special guest who we're honoured to welcome here to Galway. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal has represented Washington's 7th Congressional District, which encompasses most of Seattle, since 2017. Having come to the United States by herself at the age of 16, she's the first and only South Asian American woman ever elected to the US House of Representatives. She serves on the US House Budget, Foreign Affairs, Judiciary and Steering and Policy Committees. She's Chair Emerita of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and a leading opponent of Donald Trump and oligarchic attacks on democracy. She has spent over 20 years leading organising and advocacy efforts for women's and immigrant rights and racial and economic justice. She's the author of the Medicare for All Act, the landmark universal healthcare legislation in the United States, and is a forceful proponent for peace, taxing the rich and protecting poor and working people. So we are absolutely thrilled to have her here with us today in Galway, and so far she's enjoying herself, and we hope that that will continue for the rest of her stay. She's being interviewed by somebody who needs no introduction, our own Fintan O'Toole, who's been writing about the subject of our discussion this evening, who I won't name, just out of spite, for the last several years in the New York Review of Books. So he is educating America about their current troubles, as he did Britain about Brexit, which was one of the most joyful experiences I think we ever had. An Irishman telling British people about Boris Johnson. It couldn't have been better. He's a very well-known, you know his column in the Irish Times, you know the many, many books he's written, including We Don't Know Ourselves, A Personal History of Ireland Since 1958. Please welcome Fintan O'Toole and Pramila Jayapal.
Thank you very much, Katrina. And what an extraordinary program Katrina creates here every year. It really is a joy and a privilege to be part of it. Even if we're sometimes talking about dark things, just the fact that we're talking together and we're here together can feel a kind of a positive energy that radiates out of this place. I think it is a tonic for most of us. It's a particular pleasure to be asking the questions here rather than being on the other side of it. I don't know if any of you watched, there's a piece of film that went viral last week, well, early this week actually.
This week, yeah.
Which was Pramila questioning an unfortunate Under-Secretary of State. And if you just Google it, it's really terrifying. And I'm just really glad I'm not her. But I just thought we might start with that because I mean I'm joking about it, and in a way it is funny. I think it might be one of the reasons people have become fascinated by watching it, but it's also horrifying. Could you maybe just tell us what was going on there and what it tells us more broadly about this administration?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. And Katrina, thank you so much for inviting me. This was a House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing, and we had in the 4th highest individual at the Department of State. So this is our State Department. She's responsible for all of the consular bureaus around the country, all of the diplomatic efforts out of the various places within the Department of State that are located in other countries and are the representatives of US foreign policy abroad. And the way hearings work is you get 5 minutes to ask your questions. So you have to know exactly what you're going to do. And I had 2 parts to my questioning. One I didn't get to on Sudan. The other one was on China, but really it was on what the Department of State is doing in laying off all of these workers from the Department of State who are career civil servants who have dedicated their lives to this, and whether or not the Department of State even has a strategy around what the Trump administration says is making America great again. And what was terrifying about this is that this woman, and in 9 years, I've seen a lot of witnesses who are terrible from a moral perspective. I disagree completely with them on policy. I have never seen anybody as incompetent as this person. And she could not answer a single question. We got into questioning about the laying off of workers who speak the languages. In this case, my questioning was around China. And the State Department has an arbitrary target where they just fired a whole host of people in all of our bureaus around the world. And this woman could not tell me if they had Mandarin speakers. She refused to answer most of my questions. And I think there was silence when I even asked her whether it was valuable to have Mandarin language skills represented. And she was silent. And I said, it's not a hard question. That's actually the easiest of the questions. And I think what it tells us overall is the way in which this administration is destroying all of our global relationships, all of the knowledge that we have with our civil servant base that has been trained, bilingual, worked all over the world, Afghanistan, every country in the world has been destroyed. The cuts to the State Department, the cuts to USAID, the cuts to PEPFAR, all of the humanitarian assistance, everything is gone. Now, Marco Rubio was in for questioning maybe a month ago, and he insists that certain things are happening that are not. For example, he says there's been no break in humanitarian assistance anywhere in the world. That's not true. It's just not true. The Trump administration just destroyed, incinerated enormous amounts of food that were being sent to other countries. And so,
also contraceptive devices.
Contraceptives also, another big thing was incinerated.
Destroying them. I mean,
yes. Yes, and so I think, from a global perspective, we are completely ceding our leadership. Part of my questioning was about how we have less diplomatic forces than China around the world now. We are going to be a smaller contributor to the United Nations because we pulled our contributions from the UN than China is. And so really, if you're thinking about making America great, this is certainly not, in my opinion, this is certainly not the way we're going to do it.
And I suppose we have to see all of this as part of, it's this kind of weird mixture of incompetence and deliberate carelessness, So it's also vandalism, on a huge scale, isn't it?
Stealing,
And isn't a lot of it about this actually, quite systematic destruction of any independent force within government and then also within civil society, that really this is an attempt to concentrate power completely in the executive.
That's right, because a lot of these agencies had a lot of discretion to do what they needed to do, and they're staffed by civil servants who have served Democratic and Republican administrations with the idea that foreign policy for the United States is not a partisan effort, it is for the American people. But this is clearly not that. There isn't a single, I don't think there's a single person that Donald Trump has installed into any top position, much less even the positions below those, that is not a through and through loyalist, including in the independent agencies that were established by Congress that were supposed to be independent, like the CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That's the agency that takes on big corporations in the interests of the American people. All of those agencies are being, all of the people at those agencies are being replaced by loyalists, and the only criteria is, do you have loyalty to Donald Trump to do anything that he tells you to do?
We want to go on to talk about the resistance and about the, the possibilities of alternatives. But I suppose in order to get us there, we kind of have to step back a little bit and think, okay, I mean, why did the Democrats lose? And lose pretty comprehensively. I know that, the numbers are fairly thin, but nonetheless, all the swing states, Trump won, of course, both houses. What happened?
I joked with Katrina yesterday. I said, I know the title that you want for this talk is, What the F is Going On in America? I think that this isn't about one election loss. I think that's the first really important thing to say. This has been happening. We have been losing working people and poor people in America for 30 years. I would say going back to Clinton, actually, and going back to free trade, fair trade debate that was happening at the time. And there was a conscious decision on the part of some Democrats in leadership to embrace pieces of neoliberal economic thinking. And so that mixture, combined with kind of a political system that is rife for taking advantage of by corporate entities, by people that are rich and powerful, but also the Electoral College itself and the fact that only certain states are important in an election. Only certain people are important in an election. And so that led to not talking to people who hadn't voted before or who had voted in one of the last 3 elections. Everything for campaigns was decided by a very small, increasingly smaller group of people. And so I think that I think the Democratic Party just really sacrificed working people and poor people and decided that they were, in fact, there's a clip that emerged of Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader now, saying in I think it was 2016 or 2017, saying for every working class person we lose, I think it was in Pennsylvania, we will get 2 Republicans in these other states. So there was a very conscious decision to move away from being a party that represented poor and working people, that was willing to take on the corporations, that had a strong trade unionist movement, and to move in a very different direction. And I think what you saw this time was there are 80 million people in America who did not vote in this election. And I think we have about the same as Ireland in terms of percentages. Yours might be 57%. I think ours is maybe 60%. That are voting in an election. But for us, that is a remarkable number of people. And the reason we lost a popular vote this time is because so many people who voted in the last election for Democrats, for Joe Biden, and Democrats up and down the ticket, did not vote this time. And so we've lost people who have decided that they used to vote for Democrats, but now they're voting for Republicans. That's a smaller number. It is certainly happening, but it is a smaller number. But the big number is the people who just stay home because they're frustrated with the Democratic Party. And they don't necessarily think that there is a big difference between what Democrats will do and what Republicans will do. And it's all expressed in the statistics. The wealth inequality in America today is stunning, absolutely stunning, where you have the top 1% owning something like 1/3 of all of the wealth in the country and the bottom 50% owning about 3% of the wealth. And you think about minimum wage and how we have not had an increase in the federal minimum wage for 13 years. So it's now at $7 in the United States. And we have something in the US called a tipped minimum wage, which is the most ridiculous idea, where you can earn $2 as long as you can make up to the federal amount through tips. So that requires people to, essentially have to work for tips and all the things that come along with that. So that provides the opportunity for people to then start blaming each other. And of course, this is where immigrants and trans people and every other minority community comes in, is Trump made good use of that kind of nativist thought and blamed it all on immigrants and blamed it all on other people instead of on the corporations that control so much and the billionaires that control so much.
How damaging do you think it was that, you had this kind of paradox, which is the Democrats actually had a very progressive presidency. Biden, yes. For all his limitations.
I've called him the most progressive president we've had.
Yeah, and the huge gains made in terms of, the first president to really get through a response to climate change finally. At least the beginnings of serious attempts to bring back industrial jobs, often in red states. There was a story to tell, and yet there seemed, from my own watching of it, it seems to be a real reluctance to actually claim a progressive agenda, you know, to actually use words like equality, you know. I mean, Kamala Harris, whom I think was probably in a very difficult situation anyway, but I don't ever remember hearing her once talk about economic equality. She talked about economic opportunity and nice phrases like that, but just wouldn't go for the anger that must be at the core of what so many people are feeling about this massive transfer of generational wealth from ordinary working people to a tiny number of oligarchs. Why was there that reluctance to just take this on?
Well, I think for her, she, you know, there is control of the Democratic Party by a set of consultants and by a set of moneyed interests. Because of the way we have money in politics. I mean, such an enormous amount of money in politics. And so the parties raise money from wealthy people and from big corporations. And so there is this deep reluctance to take on corporations, to take on billionaires and millionaires, because you're essentially asking them for money. It's a terrible thing. But I also think it's part of the legacy of the neoliberal economic thinking. Somehow these folks are going to save us. They're not going to save us. They're going to destroy us and take away all the opportunity that exists for anyone else, as long as it's putting money in the, you know, profits in their pockets. I think with Joe Biden, the thing that was different is that we had Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders running against Joe Biden in the lead up to the election. Yeah. And we, the progressive movement, was very focused. I led when Sanders dropped out, there were task forces that were formed called the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Forces. So I led the one on healthcare for Bernie. Each candidate nominated somebody to lead the thing. And so I led it for Bernie on healthcare. And I think all of that forced Joe Biden to be the progressive, on economic policy only, on progressive economic policy president that he was. And we did a lot of work to get top people in there around him that would listen to him. Elizabeth Warren was key to that as well. And so I think the agenda was also coming at the same time as COVID. And so there was this desire, and Joe Biden is a genuine public servant. I mean, he wants to be a public servant. And so there was this desire for him to have a legacy that rivaled FDR's. And I think that was a big part of it, along with the movement that pushed him there, along with Bernie, Elizabeth, all of us. But he's not a good communicator. And he also still had a lot of old Joe Biden in him. Let's be bipartisan. Let's not upset the systems too much. Let's not get rid of the filibuster in the Senate so that we can pass a higher minimum wage. So what ended up happening is while we got a lot of things done, the largest investment ever in taking on climate change, really stunning. We changed the tax system, not entirely, but some. So we got a lot of things done, but he wasn't really able to communicate them. And many of them came very late in the cycle. And I always think that the best example of sort of how Joe Biden communicated and how Donald Trump communicated, you know, Donald Trump signed every check for COVID relief that went out to every American. That was something that we, the progressive movement, demanded. He didn't want to do it, but we sent out checks to every American. Never been done in the history of the United States that it wasn't signed by the Secretary of the Treasury. Donald Trump signed every check. When we told Joe Biden to sign the second set of checks, he said, oh no, we don't do that, right? And so that is a lot of who Joe Biden still was. He still believed in bipartisanship. He still wanted to be the rational, reasonable president, and he was not a good communicator. Yeah,
and of course that difficulty of communication, I mean, was enhanced by his difficulties, you know, which were increasingly obvious. Looking back, should people have spoken out earlier to say that it was not feasible for him to run again, to give more time for a primary, you know, which is so critical to, I mean, you were just talking about the way in which Warren and Bernie standing, okay, neither of them got the nomination, but they changed the agenda very radically. And there was no opportunity really to have that kind of debate at all, because it was really too late. Looking back on it, do you think mistakes were made?
I mean, I think he should have done what he said he was going to do, which was to be a one-term president, a bridge president, and then opened it up. Yep. At a certain point, it became very late, and I think the dangers were on both sides. Do you leave him there? Do you pull him and have a candidate who only has a couple of months in a country that still has a lot of racism and sexism embedded in it? I think those were very difficult moments of decision, and I think that I was still the chair of the Progressive Caucus at the time, we were very divided. I mean, even the Progressive Caucus, because remember, Biden, on domestic economic policy, I'm not talking about foreign policy, but on domestic economic policy, he was far more progressive than Obama, far more progressive than anybody we've seen in recent history. And so he got a lot of things done that we wanted. And so I think there was a lot of, even though people knew that he wasn't a great communicator, I do think that the people around him closed off access to him, even to those of us who had extensive access to him early in the first 2 years. And so that was another problem, is nobody really knew what was going on.
Yeah.
But there's no question, had we had a primary, and we need an active, very, very active primary. Nobody should be endorsing anybody early on, because we need to see these people that are gonna run and see what they can do and see how good they are or not good they are, and be able to push them if they're not good.
Yep. So obviously, we are where we are. It failed. We have this second radical Trump administration, which I think is much more radical than the first one.
Yeah, it is.
Much more coherent in its way. I mean, still, of course, subject to the instincts and whims and midnight rages of the tyrant, but nonetheless, there is a very clear agenda behind it. And I just wanted to get your sense of, you're right there at the coalface, and if you were Trump and you were the people around him, more importantly, how would you feel they're doing?
The people around
Trump. I mean, do you think they would have good reason to feel that they're still winning?
I just think they do anything he wants, so I don't even know that they're thinking about it. I mean, I can honestly say that so many of my Republican colleagues are doing things that they have spoken out against over and over again, voting for bills that are bad for their constituents. So I just don't think that there's any independent thinking about whether this is good for the country or whether they're winning. I'm sure they would tell you they're winning because he's getting a lot of things done. That is true. He's getting his agenda done. He's destroying agencies. He's doing, he learned from his first term. Yeah. And he has now nobody, General Mark Milley, who stopped him from using the military, on American soil against people who were protesting for justice. He's no longer there. He's got everybody who essentially is a yes person to him. So from that perspective, I suppose they would say that they're winning. If you look at his numbers, they are in the tank. I mean, there hasn't been a more unpopular president, even on issues like immigration or the economy, where he had the advantage before. Now, that doesn't mean the Democrats have the advantage, unfortunately. I wish I could say that were the case. But it is true that he is extremely unpopular. And I do think we're peeling off some of the people who thought they were voting for something different and are seeing now that he has no interest in them. And so I do think that's happening. And whether or not we can translate that into a victory for Democrats, I don't know. But it depends on how bold and brave we're willing to be. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that does seem shocking, even strategically from his own point of view, is that, he is, maybe just you would give us a sense of this on the ground, right? So the big, beautiful bill. I mean, what does that mean for ordinary working people? What are the consequences? For people, many of whom would have voted for Trump and who would have believed him when he said, I will protect your health care, and I'll protect the vets, and he was very explicit about a lot of those things, and clearly a lot of people believed him. So what's about to happen with all of that?
Yeah, well, I call it the big bad betrayal bill, because that's really what it is. It's a betrayal of working people and poor people across America. So the big one that you've probably heard about is the cuts to Medicaid. That's our state-federal partnership to provide health care to people who can't afford it. So lowest income. It also provides the money for nursing homes. It also provides long-term care if you're at home, that kind of thing. So it's not just healthcare, it's healthcare in a broad sense, I should say. So the latest numbers from the entity that estimates this is that 10 to 11 million Americans will lose their health insurance completely due to these Medicaid cuts. Now, we already have an enormous number of Americans who are either uninsured or underinsured. That's about 88 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured, meaning they have insurance that either they or their company is paying for, but they are still not able to get the health care that they need. So that's where the GoFundMe accounts come in, other ways that people fund healthcare, or they just don't get the care they need. So this will add to that, but in addition, the changes to the Affordable Care Act will add about another 7 million Americans who will either see their costs go up dramatically or will lose portions of their healthcare. So that's on the healthcare side. In addition, there's about $170 billion that was cut from our nutrition assistance program. This is food for the hungry. And to me, the thing that gets me emotional every time I think about this is in the richest country in the world, we have so many people who are hungry. And so we have this program that's always been bipartisan. It's called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. It provides $2 per meal on average. That's it, $2 per meal. They cut $176 billion from SNAP, which is about a third of the entire program. So that means tens of millions of Americans are going to be without food. It also sets up about a $500 billion cut to Medicare, which is our healthcare program for seniors. And these are all things, by the way, that Trump said he wouldn't touch. Now, in addition, there's lots of other things in the bill that are crazy, but these are some of the big things. He took away all the student loan programs, repayment programs that we had put in place, and he's even taken away the loan programs for graduate students that's been around for a long time. So there are a number of things in here, but across the board, energy costs are going to go up, healthcare costs are going to go up, food is going to go up. And so Americans will be left poorer and sicker. And everyone is going to feel it. It also has sort of cascading consequences. So we're estimating that a number of nursing homes that are funded through Medicaid will shut down, most of them in rural areas and Republican areas, and that rural hospitals will close at an extraordinary rate because Medicaid funding pays for a lot of those hospitals. Some of those cuts will not come, the genius of the Republican Party in a way that, is terrible, will not come until after the midterm elections. Yep. So we won't see those cuts come into play. But we are seeing nursing homes and hospitals already closing down because the whole healthcare, whatever limited healthcare system we had in America, which is really a system designed for profits, not people, that will be destroyed, mostly destroyed by the end of this. But a lot of that won't happen until after the midterm.
So you could make a very strong case to say that in some respects, Trump is destroying at least part of his own base. The betrayal, as you say, is naked. Yeah. It may not kick in until after the midterms, but
people are seeing it.
See it, yeah. And it's
extraordinarily unpopular bill.
You can also see just at simple levels of inflation, for example, which was a huge issue for Trump and a huge benefit for him. The price of eggs, all that stuff.
Yep.
The tariffs are obviously going to feed into increasing prices. So I get the sense, and I don't know whether this is accurate or not, that there are some people in the Democratic Party who think, just let him at it. He's going to destroy himself. We don't really need to have a story here. He's the story. And in a way, that's been the case really since 2015. Trump has been the story. And he's set the terms, and then everybody else is the non-Trump. And it hasn't worked. Yeah. Yes, people can get disgusted with Trump. They can get bored with him. They can get angry with him. but it's not, it seems to me, not really going to make any fundamental difference unless there's a story which is at least as powerful for people as Trump's story has been. You know, whatever horror Trump is guilty of, he's instinctively smart at identifying enemies. We'll talk about immigration in a minute, but you know, he knows what he's doing with that stuff. And a counter narrative surely has to be a sort of left-wing populism that is as capable of being rough and angry, but just channeling that anger, the justified anger, in the right directions, rather than saying, you know, this temptation to say, let's get back to sanity and just be very nice. And of course, people want rational, sane politics, but it can't be a politics that's just bland. Do you think that's right?
Absolutely, but I ran the Progressive Caucus, so that's been my view for some time. I mean, I don't think we can just be an opposition party. We have to be an incredibly effective opposition party, and we have to lay the blame on the shoulders of the giant corporations and the billionaires who are, I didn't mention that this bill, the Big Bad Betrayal Bill, will be the largest transfer of wealth from poor and working people to the wealthiest. So the top 0.1 of 1% in America in 2026 will get an average tax cut of $286,000 per person. So this is a remarkable, absolutely stunning. And if we can't call that out and forsake whatever money is going to come to our campaigns because people are going to give it to us, we will lose again. So we have to be willing to do what Kamala Harris wouldn't do, and call out the billionaires and the giant corporations. And we've got to be willing to be an opposition party that is explaining where the blame should lie, because every story needs a good villain, and we have a good villain here. These drug companies, incredibly unpopular, that are bilking people. So there's a lot of places where we can do that, but we also have to be a proposition party. We actually have to propose a vision that excites people, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. I really think that what people need to know is that they're going to have a roof over their head, food on the table, education for their kids, the ability to retire with dignity, and healthcare from the day you're born to the day you die. And really, and a planet to pass on to their kids and their grandkids. And I think if we are able to say that, but say it in a way that is convincing, and then actually immediately deliver on some of those things, that's the vision people are looking for. Because most people, you can find examples of politicians from Obama, Clinton, both Clintons, who said universal health care. And certainly the Affordable Care Act did increase health care for millions of Americans, and it was a good step forward. But it fundamentally tapped into the same broken system, where private insurance companies control everything in healthcare, and drug companies. And so we have to be willing to say we're going to fix the system, and that includes getting rid of things like the filibuster, because if you don't get rid of the filibuster, and I know this is an incredibly educated audience on US politics, 40 senators control, who represent 12% of the country's population, control every vote in the United States Senate.
It's worth just repeating that, 12% of the population.
12%.
Because of this really totally skewed nature of the Senate. So 40 of those people can
It's stunning, right? I mean, it is stunning. And it's not like that's always been the case. I mean, the filibuster is the legacy of Jim Crow. It was put in place to keep terrible things against black people in place. But it has been the case for some time, and Biden among them. But Republicans and Democrats have always seen that as that makes the Senate a deliberative body, whereas we in the House are ruffians. We just go by a simple majority in the House. But in the Senate, you need 60 votes to pass anything. And there has not been a supermajority, 60-vote threshold with the same party in office in the House, the Senate, and the White House. Since Barack Obama, which was for 74 days. There was a supermajority for 74 days under Barack Obama, but before that, it was Clinton. So It's been a long time that we have not had the ability to move critical bills from minimum wage to collective bargaining for unions, to give unions more power, workers more power, to voting rights, fixing voting rights, getting money out of politics, reforming the Supreme Court. These are all structural things that need to be fixed.
Yep, yep. Two particular things then. So, I mean, obviously, being willing to take up a story about economic justice, placing that at the heart of what you talk about. There's also Gaza, right? So I don't know if you would agree with this, but it seems to me that Gaza has had the same effect on disillusioning a generation about the sincerity of politics and politicians that the Iraq War had for a previous generation of young people. Because if you don't stand up for a coherent sense of human rights, and international law, and you start sort of saying, well, what Putin was doing in Ukraine was really, really terrible, bombing civilians and bombing civilian infrastructure. That's war crime. It's terrible, And then, but over there, that's different. It's not just that it has this appalling effect in Gaza, but it also has this toxic effect, it seems to me, on Western democratic politics in general.
Absolutely.
And why have so many Democrats been so reluctant to just say this, just to talk about it honestly? I mean, it didn't feature in November at all. And is that changing?
Well, probably the biggest fights I had with Joe Biden during his presidency was around Gaza. I mean, this was the issue that I could not believe his intransigence, the administration's intransigence on Gaza. One of the many reasons I love Ireland is we were hiking in the Dingle Peninsula last year, my husband and I, and we would see these Palestinian flags everywhere in these little towns, places I'd never expected. And today we were out walking and there was a protest happening right there. I mean, in the United States, this issue, there are some others, but this issue is, the United States Congress is so controlled by a particular lobby that does not allow anybody to see or vote. Really, people see it. The majority of the American people actually see how ridiculous it is that we continue to send money to Israel for bombs that are bombing the Gazan people, the Palestinian people, everything that's happening in the West Bank, and continuing to fund the Netanyahu government in violation of our own domestic laws. We have Leahy laws that say we can't fund a country that is in violation of international humanitarian law, which Israel clearly is. And yet, there's probably over 100 votes in favor of continuing that funding over and over and over again. I have the bills the Block the Bombs bill. I introduced with Bernie the joint resolutions of disapproval around arms sales to Israel. So, I've had a lot of those bills. They don't go anywhere. They never get a vote. And there is, again, so much money that comes in to fund opponents of anybody who votes for those things. I've had that certainly in my district. My sister ran for Congress in Oregon, and poor thing, her name was Jayapal, and so they put in $7.5 million in the last 3 weeks of her election to buy that election. One person put in $1 million from a state that wasn't even hers. And so people are afraid of that money, and they continue to vote for it. Now, I also think there's a story that's been told about Israel and the relationship to the United States and the Palestinian people that a lot of people in Congress have also bought into, but I don't think that's all of them. I think that if you took the money out, that there would be a lot of people, at least on the Democratic side, who would actually vote for the thing that is morally true and also good for America.
Yeah. I mean, the other huge issue, of course, is immigration and Trump's, because we were talking about the defunding and the gutting of so many agencies, but of course, parallel to that, you have the building of this police state with ICE, with these huge detention centers. I think you mentioned 170 billion, but there's also 170 billion, isn't there, is going into ICE and these, can we call them concentration centers? But this building of this totally unaccountable paramilitary empire.
Yeah.
And I'd love to get your sense of how that's playing. So clearly, Trump obviously thought that this is his big card to play. It's not just a very potent issue in itself, but it's also the one that allows him to sort of build this authoritarian structure. Again, on the ground, what are the effects of this, but also where's the opposition to it?
Yeah.
And again, are the Democrats kind of failing to put forward a kind of positive narrative about migration in America?
Yeah, well, this is my issue. I was an immigrant rights activist for 20 years before coming to Congress, so I've worked on this issue for such a long time, and I'm now the top Democrat on the immigration subcommittee. And I think that Trump's overreach will be our savior here, because I do think that the United States, for everything that we've done wrong, for all the ways that we've had a screwy immigration system, we do have this identity that has been perpetually in our history and in our minds linked to immigration, a country of immigrants. I mean, that the Statue of Liberty, all of those things are linked to immigration, and people do tend to have a positive view of immigration. Now, what's happened is for 30 years, we haven't fixed the immigration system. So we have caps on the numbers of people that can come to the United States that are from 30 years ago. And you can imagine the change in the demographics of people that are in the United States, the economy, all of those things. And we've never changed the numbers. And so there is no line to get in. There is no logical system that people can go to. Took me 17 years to get my US citizenship. Now I went from visa to visa. I call it the alphabet soup of visas, and ultimately only got my permanent residence because I happened to get married to an American. But most people are not in a situation where they can tolerate that kind of thing. And we've got all of the crises around the world for global migration. It's an issue everywhere in the world. And so we've got a system that simply doesn't work. It is broken. And because it has always been a great place to place blame on an immigrant, we've had Republicans who have refused to fix it. Now, in 2013, we had 68 bipartisan votes in the United States Senate. People like Lindsey Graham, others, all voted for a bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform bill that would have fixed it. And came to the House, and John Boehner was the Speaker of the House, and the Republican Party said, no, we can't afford to fix immigration. We need to leave immigrants out there as a great bullying tool, so don't fix it. So it never came to a vote. It would have passed if it had come to the House floor. And so I think what's happening now is the overreach. Trump lied to people, once again, on immigration. He said, I'm going to go after the worst of the worst, the criminals. And people were sick of seeing people coming into the United States and feeling as if they were getting more than the average American, which isn't, for the most part, true. But it was still, when you have Maslow's hierarchy of needs and you have this incredible wealth and income inequality, and then you see more people coming in to take what's very little for you, you instinctively do this. You want to hold on to what you have. You don't want other people to get it. And so immigrants were a great place to blame. But I think now what's happening is people are seeing he's not going after the worst of the worst. He's not going after people who have a criminal record. He's not even going after the undocumented or the illegal, as they call it. He's going after people with legal statuses, legal permanent residence, visa holders, people who say things about Palestine that they don't like, graduate students, even US citizens. And this is too much for people. And they're sending masked men. I mean, this is the United States of America, which is stunning. I just can't believe that this is happening. Masked men being sent into the streets of our major cities and minor cities to kidnap and disappear people. And with the money that is in the big bad betrayal bill, another piece of it that I didn't mention, we will put $45 billion more solely into incarcerating immigrants. And the 4 private prison companies make all of that money. So it's all profits, even if they detain a US citizen incorrectly and try to deport, which they have. They've deported US citizens. Strange thing to say, because where would you deport them to? But they have. They've sent them to other countries. It's money-making to keep them in a private for-profit detention facility for several weeks. So this is now more money on the immigration detention system than on the entire Bureau of Prisons. And the immigration system in the United States is a civil system, not a criminal system. You don't get assigned a lawyer, so there's no attorneys that are provided for free. If you can afford one, you can have one, but you don't get an attorney, and so the due process concerns are substantial. But I do think that this is one, and maybe, this feels like such a dark conversation. I'm a very optimistic, hopeful person. Fintan hasn't brought that out in me yet, because all the questions are so dark, but it is a dark time, is the truth of it. And I do think that this is one area where his overreach, just like family separation, where he separated moms from their babies in his first term, this is gonna produce a similar result, and we're already seeing it in the polling. Now the task is to get Democrats to not run away from the issue and to embrace it and explain it to people and bring people in to our solution, which we have. It's a hard political problem. It's actually not a hard problem to solve from a policy perspective.
Yes. I know people are probably very interested in the whole Epstein conspiracy. It's surreal, extremely strange, but it does suggest maybe for the first time that there's a sort of gap opening up, and that the conspiracy theories are always like whirlpools, aren't they? They do suck in the very people who create them. I mean, do you think, is this just a kind of summer story that will go, or is it seriously affecting Trump?
I think it's seriously, who would have thought that Jeffrey Epstein would be the thing that would create the divisions in the MAGA movement? But this is a crisis of their own making, because obviously they spun up the conspiracy themselves. This was all, he was arrested under Trump. He died under Trump, under Trump's first term. And they spun this all up into a conspiracy theory. And now they're getting caught in their own conspiracy theory. But he is, first I didn't think, when it first came out, and it's hard to believe, I think it's only been 2 weeks. It feels like it's occupied way too much of my brain space. But at first I didn't think that it was gonna be much. But what happened is he kept insisting that there was nothing there, and taking on, he called his own base out, and said he doesn't need their votes, and this is a giant hoax. And then, of course, you had Elon Musk, during the big split between Musk and Trump, say he's in the Epstein files. So that sort of seeded some things. And you had Pam Bondi, when she came in, the Attorney General, saying over and over again that she was going to release the files, she was going to release the files, she was going to release the files. She had the client list on her desk. And then suddenly there was no client list, and the files were not going to be released. And then Trump, lying to the public again, he was asked in an interview on television maybe a week ago whether he had been briefed on the files and the fact that his name was in there. Actually it was before it was announced that his name was in there. And he said, no, I haven't, a very brief discussion with the Attorney General about it. And then it comes out, not from some liberal paper, but from the Wall Street Journal, that his name is in there. And so now the fact that he has so vehemently opposed the release of the files has got even his base up in arms about this. And so I even saw that the Stuart Rhodes of the Oath Keepers, who Trump pardoned for his role in the insurrection, talk about a dark moment in American history, but he pardoned him. He was a leader of one of these right-wing groups that incited all of this violence. Stuart Rhodes called out Trump on the Epstein files.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is going away. And Democrats forced a vote on the Oversight Committee to subpoena the records. And the whole House shut down this week. This was a very strange week in Washington, D.C., because the Republicans did not want to allow any Rules Committee hearings or any committee hearings, because every time they have a hearing, we bring amendments to vote on releasing the files. And some of the Republicans didn't want to be put on the record voting against them. And so they shut the House floor down, and we had no votes, except what's called suspension votes, which are basically meaningless things that usually are about renaming post offices that require a 2/3 vote, don't require you to go through a committee.
Renaming, by the way, as we were walking up, you were telling me something, even in Trump world, I found difficult to believe. This is about, the Kennedy Center in Washington?
Yes.
Did you know this?
Yes, somebody said it.
I missed this one somehow.
Yes. They're renaming it for Melania Trump.
Being named the Melania Trump Center. I mean, so let's...
And you wonder why I'm here in Ireland. I said yes immediately.
I'm going to bring in the audience in a minute, but let's be optimistic then. So
yes, please.
Out of all this. But it does seem to me that obviously it's a terrible, terrible time, and there's no point in pretending otherwise. But it's also, it is a turning point, isn't it? I mean, where you either, and of course we're coming up to this big anniversary of the foundation of the American Republic, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that it now is either radically reformed, both institutionally, but also in terms of the basic Republican promise of equality, decency for everybody, or it's gone. The really isn't very much in the middle between those two alternatives, and that's the source of a certain amount of terror, but also perhaps a certain kind of possibility, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, I think that Americans have been very complacent about our democracy. I mean, we had a lot to stand on. We talk about the Founding Fathers all the time, checks and balances. But I do think that this moment has allowed us to refocus everyone's attention on what it takes to hold a democracy, what it takes to actually keep your democracy. And that the checks and balances, the founding framers were smart men, but they missed a lot of things. And one of the things they missed is that every check and balance that's in the Constitution actually requires the majority party to also want to preserve the powers that are built into the Constitution, right? So if you think about Article 1, and by the way, people say co-equal branches of government, and my colleague Jamie Raskin, who's a constitutional scholar, always gets really angry at that and says, no, Article 1 is very big. Those are the powers of Congress. Article 2, which is presidential powers, is actually quite small. There's not a lot there. So we are the first branch of government, but we're a majority-controlled branch. So if the majority party does not want to preserve its own constitutional powers, that check is gone. Yeah. And then if you have a Supreme Court, because the next check would be the judicial branch, but if you have a Supreme Court that has a majority that is also corrupt and right-wing and interested in redesignating history in the Constitution and taking away rights that have been there for over 50 years in some cases, then that branch is also, now there have been a lot of successes in the courts, in the lower courts, particularly in the federal courts, ruling against Trump, and those have been Reagan appointees, Bush appointees, Clinton and Obama, and Biden appointees. So across the partisan spectrum, the lower courts have been doing a very good job. But then what's happening is the Supreme Court has been consolidating its power and has been overturning the decisions which were temporary restraining orders from the lower courts. So anyway, whatever the case is, if they continue to do that, then we're going to have a situation where the judicial branch isn't serving as a check. And then the only option for a check and a balance in American democracy is the people. And so the thing that has given me the most hope is that I've started these trainings called Resistance Lab, And in 4 months, we've trained over 11,000 people in all 50 states and 6 countries around the world. It's virtual. And it's really a look at how democracies fail. What does democratic backsliding look like around the world as well as in the United States? What are the most effective, non-violent tactics of resistance? And how do you build that kind of a movement? Because a lot of people in America have forgotten even the civil rights movement. And so we go through the teachings of Dr. King, and we talk about what it means to actually take risk. What does non-cooperation look like? What do mass movements look like? And those are the things that's the thing that gives me the most hope and inspiration right now, because I feel like the American people are looking at their role in democracy differently. And they are engaging in a very different way. And they don't really know what to do, and they're very angry and frustrated. And I think many people say to me, oh, I'm afraid to go overseas because I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed of my country. And so that is new. And I've had Republicans who voted for Trump on those trainings. So I do feel like we are pulling people away. Now, you know, the number in research is to fight democratic backsliding is 3.5%. So 3.5% of the population has to be engaged in sustained nonviolent resistance movements in order to really be successful. We don't know. This is not like any other time, I don't think. But I say that to people because you don't need to win everybody, but you do need to win a significant number of people. And you go not after the person at the top, but you actually go after the pillars of support that prop up a dictator or an authoritarian. And so the Tesla takedowns was actually a good example of that because it got Musk out of the White House.
Yeah.
I mean, Musk got Musk out of the White House in many ways, but the Tesla takedowns attacked the economic premise of Musk's wealth. And so that was an important people-led movement, but there are others that need to happen at the universities, corporations, et cetera. And so that has been really wonderful to see, and I think it remains to be seen, both if we can build that kind of scale of mass movement in the United States, and also if the Democratic Party can step up in a way that allows people to feel some confidence that when the midterms come, that they actually are able to do something. But remember, we won't have probably the Senate or the White House, so it's going to be a very difficult situation, and my party sometimes can do the whole we have to be responsible thing instead of fighting back and being very strong about, you know, pushing for what should be.
The responsible thing is to fight back.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
That's right.
Could we bring the lights up, and we'll take some questions. So if you just hang on a sec so I can see you. So the first hand I saw is just there. Would you just mind waiting for the mic? And could I ask everybody to, if you can keep your question as succinct as possible, it allows more people to get in. Thank you very much.
In the past year, the members of Congress, and I'm talking now about Democratic members of Congress, have lined up to pay homage to the President of Israel on 2 occasions. Israeli Congress people are taking an exceptional amount of money from AIPAC. Does the Democratic Party have any plans to become independent and not to be led by an outside agency that's carrying out genocide as we speak?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's the... I mean, that is the fundamental question. We are, we are a system that is built on money, and that money is coming in enormously from AIPAC and from other entities that want to keep that relationship just as it is. And so we have been pushing at the Progressive Caucus to keep AIPAC out, at least of our incumbent primaries, because that is big. But the challenge is that in open primaries as well, like my sister's race that I was telling you about, that was all AIPAC money that came in against her. And it's an enormous amount of money that goes on television that's plastered all over the place. And so we really do need people who are willing to be independent thinkers on this, but that is not the leadership of the Democratic Party right now. And so I don't know what to tell you, except I can say that there is a lot of attention being paid to Zoran Mamdani in New York City, who I endorsed before his primary. And I do think that his very strong stance, obviously, on Gaza and the freedom of the Palestinian people, combined with his clear economic affordability stance and his ability to excite young people. I mean, the numbers of the voters that came in were people who have been disillusioned with the Democratic Party. So we are trying to use that moment to showcase the opportunity that we have if we were to be bold. But this issue is, it's just, it's so painful to watch. And I had, in that same day, we had another foreign affairs questioning that was about a bill that Republicans are putting through, which had Democratic votes for it, that takes away the need to even inform Congress of arms sales. All around this issue. This is all around this issue. So.
Thank you very much. Over here. Thank you.
Congresswoman, just want to thank you for your courage. It's incredibly inspiring. We're very familiar with this playbook in Europe from Hungary. The scary thing from what you've been saying about, say, the support for Trump in the polls is that, you know, Orban had ups and downs in the polls as well, but his core supporters stayed in and they dismantled the institutions and all of the kind of strategy that you're talking about here. And it's 19 years now of Orban. Now, hopefully the next election looks, in April perhaps next year, looks positive. And it's taken a new party, it looks like, to pioneer that change, and an incredibly brave opposition movement doing a lot of the things that you've described, including mass mobilization and various resistance labs and very brave actions in Parliament, you know, getting arrested for that and so on. But the question really, sorry, it's a long question, but it took a new party because the traditional opposition to Orban's party, Fidesz or whatever, was discredited, and particularly amongst the people that you wanted to win over. How credible are the Democrats to lead this challenge? Because you don't sound like the Democratic Party that appeared in the last election.
Yes, I mean, our challenge in America is we only have two parties. So you have people like me in the same tent as somebody like Joe Manchin or Kristen Sinema. Makes it very difficult. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. This is affecting politics around the world and propping up dictators in other countries. And I think that the question, we've been talking about trying to build a global progressive movement. In fact, I was supposed to go to Mexico right after this, and I decided to stay in Ireland instead of going. But there is an attempt to try and build a bigger kind of global movement for progressive politics to fight back against authoritarians, because you look at where Steve Bannon's going, he's going to all these other countries, they're drumming up support everywhere. And I do think that there are issues around oligarchy and capitalism that social democracies are facing today. I was looking at how much of your revenue in Ireland is coming from tech companies. Be careful. I represent the birth of Amazon. That was founded in my district. Probably 60% of my constituents work for one of the big 4 tech companies, and I have the bill to break up Amazon and stop corporate monopolies and I still get the most votes of any member of Congress anywhere in the country, because I do think the American people don't want that. They want to maintain independence, but I think other countries are going to have to look at that as well. And we'll try to do everything we can to push back, because we know the effects on countries around the world.
Absolutely. Just in the middle here, I think. Was there? Yes, please. Sorry, it's just 4th row. Yeah.
After this talk, they may not let me back. So,
well, you're very welcome to stay.
Hope you all don't mind if I stay.
You're very welcome to stay.
I have 2 quick questions. One, do you think there should be an upper age limit for the for the President of the United States.
There should be a what?
An age limit.
An age limit,
And following on from the previous comment, is now the time for a third political party in the States, and would you lead it?
Did my husband put you up to that second question? He's been saying that to me for years. Yes, I think there should be an age limit. I also think we need term limits for members of Congress. I'm thrilled to have served for 9 years. I don't think people should be allowed to serve for 30. It does take a time to understand the system. But we have a bottom age limit. Why don't we have a top age limit? I don't think that's disrespectful to anybody. I think that we need incentives to move people through. The Republican Party actually has term limits for chairmanships. You can do multiple committees, but you are limited. And so after you've been chair for a couple of committees, people do end up leaving in the Republican Party, which we don't have. I think we would be so much better off with a multi-party system. I just think it's incredibly difficult to engineer it. There is something called fusion politics. There's a party called the Working Families Party that started out in New York State. They've been trying to move to other states as well. But the idea is that you would have a line where you could run as a something Democrat. So you would run as a Democrat, or you would run as a Working Families Party Democrat, and you could show then that there are a certain number of votes for that kind of candidate. But most states don't have something like that. And so you would have to re-engineer the entire system. And even Bernie, who's a dear friend, runs as a Democrat when it comes to the presidential. Now, he runs as an independent senator in his Senate races. But it's very, very difficult because of the process of selecting candidates for congressional races and for presidential. So it's not impossible, and it's definitely something I'm very interested in and looking at, but it would require a lot of changes and a lot of funding. Again, we need to get money out of politics. That's one of the big things we need to do in America.
I'm just going to take three together because unfortunately these are going to have to be last. So there was somebody right down the back there, please. No, actually the first one I saw was right down the back. No, second. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a wonderful interview. The big betrayal bill, as you so aptly call it, as I understand, it also contains a clause that allows the president to either delay or cancel presidential elections. And I just wonder how great you think that risk is for the next election.
I don't believe that made it into the final bill, but I hope I didn't miss that.
Thank you.
So much mad stuff in there, who knows. There's somebody right at the front here, and then I'm going to take just one person, over here as well, and we'll have to wrap it up then, I'm afraid.
Thank you for a good debate and good question and answer session there. Congresswoman, you were clearly opposed to President Trump as chair of the Progressive Caucus, but the Democratic Party is a broad church. It serves wide constituencies. How united are the Democrats in opposition to President Trump? And number two, what does the Democratic Party stand for actually nowadays in 2025?
Thank you very much. So there was a kind of two-part question, was about how united the Democratic Party is and what does it stand for. I think we've kind of covered a lot of that, but I'll put that back, and we just take the final question here as well. Thank you very much, and then you can take them wherever you want.
Hi, who do you think will be the next Democratic presidential candidate, and who would you like to be the next Democratic?
Unfortunately, it can't be you. Of course.
I'm not a U.S. citizen, but these days the Constitution doesn't seem to matter, so excuse me, I'm not a naturalized citizen. I said I'm not a U.S. citizen, but I'm a U.S. citizen, not a naturalized citizen. I don't think anybody should answer that question. I think we need a vigorous primary, and everybody who is interested should tell us what their vision is and why we should vote for them or why we should endorse them. So I have no plans to endorse anybody or even think about who I want, because honestly, I'm waiting to see what this new moment brings us, and hopefully it brings us something fantastic. A candidate who is really going to be willing to stand up for people, working people and willing to take on the wealthy corporate interests and the fascists that wannabe dictators amongst us. So I'm waiting for that to happen, and stay tuned. If I endorse, it means I've gotten there, but I'm definitely not there yet. Your question?
So the question was really about how united the
Democratic Party is. I mean, we're united on some things. I think that people are horrified by what Trump is doing to government agencies. I think, you know, Democrats are generally united on the economic, sort of what the economic agenda should be. Whether or not we're united on how hard we should fight for it or how we should get there, I don't think that that's the case. I think people do think we in the House, the frustration that the American people have with the Democratic Party since Trump got elected, I would argue has been a lot, not entirely, but a lot with the Senate. Because the Senate has the ability to block nominations. We don't. The House doesn't vote on nominations for the cabinet. The Senate does, and you need 60 votes. The Senate has the ability to block a number of other things, including the continuing resolution, which was a big fight earlier on this year, when the House Democrats, all except one, stayed completely united and voted against the bill that Republicans were proposing because we knew that they were going to lie and take away all the money, which is exactly what they did. The Senate passed it with Schumer's blessing. And so I think there's a lot of frustration about Senate Democrats and about the Democratic Party in general. But I think that we are fairly united about, taking back the country, for sure. I think there's still work to do to see exactly what that means and how willing people are to fight for it and take on the interests that are blocking us.
We've gone way over our time, but I'm sure you'll agree with me that it's been well worth it. Thank you so much for all those questions. Hope, I think we were talking about this last week, hope, the opposite of hope, isn't despair. The opposite of hope is hatred. And that's what we're seeing. The lack of hope for so many people, curdles into the sort of toxic politics that we've seen. One of the wonderful things I think about the last hour is that we've all been given good reasons to hope, not in a happy-clappy, stupid way of ignoring the terrible things that are going on, but in the articulation of what is happening. Allowing us to actually think about that and see it, but also in the courage to fight back, not just as an individual thing, but in terms of inspiring and allowing other people to find their voices and find their courage. I think it's just been a real privilege for all of us to experience that inspiration. Thank you so much, Pramila.
Thank you.